All right. Well, welcome everyone to the traffic calming meeting for Shepherd Hills Drive. This is August 22nd, 2024 at 5:30 p.m. We're hosting this meeting virtually. My name is David Greaves. I'm working with NDOT as the engineer who will facilitate this meeting, as well as do the design and ultimately pass this on to construction to get this project built should it proceed. We're going to start by just kind of giving an overview of the program, some of the options we have when we design a traffic calming project, and then we're going to look more specifically at the concept we've developed for your street. And then lastly, we'll talk about sort of the next steps in the program, how we might move forward with it or not move forward with it, and really just be here to answer whatever questions you all may have. But to get started, let's just ask, what is traffic calming? So this is the Neighborhood Street Traffic Calming Program. And as you may guess, this focuses on residential streets. So we don't really do a whole lot in like commercial districts or industrial so much. We're really more concerned with the areas that people live and maybe walking around. And when it comes to methods, we prefer physical solutions to encourage lower speeds, and we do that over significant lengths. And what that really means is we're not trying to do like one block at a time with really small projects. It's preferable to try to knock out a little more at once. And the primary goal of the program is speed reduction. There are 3 E's in traffic calming: education, enforcement, and engineering. Engineering there is bold and underlined because that's really what NDOT has the most control over. This is an NDOT project, so we're going to engineer a solution that we think will, slow traffic as it's using your street. But we can also do education. This is, sort of one example of the ways that NDOT reaches out to the community to encourage safe behavior. And then finally, enforcement is in the realm of Metro Nashville Police Department. So they're not really, under NDOT's control. And while they certainly do attempt to enforce the speeds on our roads as much as they can, there's no way they could be everywhere at once. So we like to look for ways to slow speed that doesn't require police officers to be, hanging out in your neighborhood writing people tickets. I mentioned the primary goal of this program is speed reduction, and that really stems from safety and vision zero, which is a much broader goal of NDOT. And it's sort of imagining a scenario where nobody in Nashville could die or be seriously injured on the roadways that we are responsible for. The graphic at the kind of middle of the screen is a good demonstration of how speed reduction ties into safety. And that basically just shows that as we're in the 25-mile-an-hour range, what the speed limit is on most residential streets, a pedestrian who's hit by a car has a pretty good chance of surviving. Not 100%, unfortunately, but 89% certainly is. You could expect that person would be okay. But as you get higher in speed, that 35 and then 45-mile-an-hour range, a person's chances of surviving go way down. So on streets where we see people driving kind of between that 35, 45-mile-an-hour range, we get really concerned that if folks are walking around, they're in pretty serious danger of losing their life, which is not what we want at all. This is a really popular program. So around Davidson County, there are currently 480 neighborhood streets who have applied. That's as of March 2023 when this street was selected. And you all were selected with a group of 25 neighborhood streets. So we're able to chip away at the backlog of traffic calming projects, but certainly there are a lot of places that would like to have the kind of project.
This is just specifically Shepherd Hills Drive.
I'll get into that in a second.
Okay, gotcha.
But,
okay, cool.
Yeah, the answer is yes and no. We'll take a look at the project extents.
No problem.
In just a sec. So there's a few things that the traffic calming program is able to do. We'll talk about those in a minute. But for anything that's sort of outside the constraints that we operate under, we want to make sure everyone is aware of Hub Nashville. That's an app, a website, and a phone number all in one. And it's a good way to just get in touch with Metro for just about anything that you might request from the government. So that could be streets and roads, requesting a sidewalk, stop signs, but also things like trees, trash, litter. They do it all. So 311 is the number. Hub.Nashville.gov is the website, and then the app I think is a little easier to use if you're on your phone, since it's more user friendly for if you're out and about. So I mentioned that there were a lot of streets who have applied and a smaller number that were selected. This slide here sort of talks about, how we choose a street. And what we do when a street applies is go out and collect some data. So we put a collector out there after the street was applied for and measured how fast people are going. That's the 45% of that score, vehicular speeds. We also counted how many vehicles were driving up and down, so that's volume. So if you have tons of vehicles using your road, you'll score higher than if there were only a handful. And then those smaller 3 slices, we'll look at like vulnerable user injury or fatality. So we pull the crash history, and if anyone was hit by a car while walking, we want to make sure that we account for that and bump those up a little bit. Non-driver accommodations, that's whether or not your street has sidewalks. So if you're on a street with sidewalks already, we actually don't give you points, because we know that if your street doesn't have sidewalks, anyone who's walking around will be in the road. And in those cases, we really want to make sure that people are driving safely. And then that last 5% is trip destinations. So what those are parks and schools. Basically, we want to add a little bit of points there to account for places that we know that people will be or want to be walking around. Any questions about what we've covered so far before we start talking about Shepherd Hills in particular?
Everything seems good on my end.
Cool. Well, yeah, I'll just go ahead and get into it then. So we took data at one spot along Shepherd Hills and Spring Branch. So what we did was kind of combine these 2 streets into one project. It may have been applied for that way, or maybe that was a decision made for just continuity's sake. But that lighter green line here is sort of the boundaries of the project we're talking about tonight. So the speeds we measured were an 85th percentile of 37 miles an hour, which is pretty normal for the program, but pretty fast in the grand scheme of things. What that means is 15% of cars are going faster than 37 miles an hour, and 85% are going slower. What it doesn't account for are like the really extremely fast cars. That's not going to skew it up, or the really slow cars aren't going to skew it down. So it works kind of like a median, where it's not being pulled up or down by outliers, but is really focused on kind of answering like how fast are most people driving.
May I ask, when was this test done?
I'll be able to look that up. I don't have it available with me right now. But usually, well, all the time when we do traffic counts, it'll be on a weekday during the school year. So generally kind of like middle of the week, not holidays. There's sort of a handful of traffic data collection rules that we follow to make sure we're getting a representative example of traffic.
And is it a 24-hour test, or?
It is.
Okay.
Is the 37 miles per hour the average?
It's not. So the average, I think, will be a little lower, and the 85th just means that 85% of people are driving slower than that number, and 15% are driving faster. It's kind of the common way that traffic engineers look at a street. It's just a statistic that seeks to inform, how fast like a normal person driving is using the road. We had a daily volume of 1,230 cars. That's not way outside the bounds of what we see in the traffic calming program, but it certainly is a lot for, like a neighborhood street. You all appear to be connecting kind of two larger roads, so that doesn't come as a huge surprise that your volume would be a little on the higher side, but that probably would contribute to you all being selected. And then you have a couple different street widths, which will impact some of our design decisions. We'll talk about in a minute. But Shepherd Hills Drive was pretty narrow at 22 feet. That's about 2 regular lanes. And then Spring Branch Drive is a little wider, 28 feet. So you can't quite fit 3 lanes in there, but if it's only 2 lanes, they're relatively large ones. We saw this just a minute ago, but this is a map of the project, and it's actually a screenshot of NDOT's interactive traffic calming tracker. So the different colors there mean different project statuses. So you can see that Paula Drive is shown in that kind of turquoise color, and that's because we did that as a project about 6 months ago. So they'll be getting constructed at some point, maybe in the next 6 months, year, maybe. Hard to say exactly. And then should this project proceed, we'll get you all in the queue after them. So we're going to talk a little bit about the different tools we have to calm traffic. The primary one that NDOT uses are speed cushions. I'm sure if you all drive around neighborhoods in Nashville, you'll have seen these at some point. But for anyone who hasn't, they're essentially modular rubber devices we put on the road, bolted down, intended to function kind of like a speed bump, but with a higher target speed. So a speed bump you might encounter in a parking lot is going to be really short and probably a little bit taller. That's because in parking lots, it's more appropriate to drive in the 5 to 10 mile an hour range. These were not really seeking to slow drivers like way down like that. We're more targeting 20, 25 mile an hour range so that over the length of the street, folks are driving, right around that speed limit. They're about 6 feet wide, and that's a really deliberate design decision. Essentially, the thought here is that emergency vehicles with much wider wheelbases than your average car is going to be able to sort of center themselves on one of these and not maybe completely miss it, but kind of have their wheels go over those tapered sides and not be as impacted as a smaller vehicle might be. But then, regular cars, trucks, things like that, will interact with these and be slowed down by them. Similar to speed cushions, but different in some obvious ways, are speed tables. Unlike speed cushions, these don't have those gaps for emergency vehicle tires. They stretch all the way across the road. They're also a little bit longer. And these are more appropriate for kind of higher volume, more like collector style roads. And we usually only bring these out in scenarios where we've got kind of a weird street width and don't feel like we can do an adequate design with the speed cushions. I mentioned that those two things, collectively known as vertical measures, were NDOT's preferred way for doing a traffic calming project. And that's mainly because we know they work pretty well. So what we're looking at here are the results of a study that NDOT conducted in March of 2023, where they measured speeds before and after the installation of speed cushions. This wasn't the first time anyone did this. There's been national research that's happened on this subject since the late 90s, but this is sort of verifying that in Nashville's context and making sure that the way we were doing these projects was in fact effective. And we can see from the two bar charts that they are. I mean, we were pretty pleased to see these results. The average speed across these 6 projects came down from 31 to 22 miles an hour. And that 85th percent speed, like we talked about before, came down from 37 to 25. And that's exactly what we want to see. So based on the results that we're looking at here, if we install speed cushions on Shepherd Hills and Springs Branch, we would expect a similar speed reduction. There are plenty of cases where speed cushions are not feasible to install. So if the volume were really high, like over 5,000 vehicles per day, or if there were some serious hills or curves in the neighborhood, we may lean on radar feedback signs. I think we've all seen these before, but they're basically a speed limit sign and a solar-powered radar device that reports your speed back to you as you're driving by. And these can serve as a really helpful reminder. So if you weren't intending to speed, but maybe you've gone down a big hill and picked up some speed and didn't ride the brake quite as much, it's basically just communicating how fast you're going. What they don't do, they don't take any pictures. There's really no enforcement associated with these. It's purely a device to communicate back, how fast you are going. We do see an average reduction of 6 to 7 miles an hour with these. So in a lot of cases, they do slow folks down. The main difference, though, between that and the vertical measures is they don't do anything to physically affect a vehicle that's speeding. So if somebody wasn't paying attention to the sign or didn't, care what it said, there's really no way to affect that person as they're driving along the road with one of these. We can also do things like narrowing. So if we have a road that we think might be excessively wide, we can shrink it down with striping. That sort of implies that cars have less space to maneuver in and actually does slow vehicles down that way. It's not a super drastic reduction. So when we use this, it's often in concert with some other things like radar feedback signs or vertical measures. But it is another subtle way to suggest that, a given street isn't a place where someone is supposed to go fast when, with a lot of available space, it might feel like you're more on like an interstate or a larger arterial road. And that can kind of subconsciously increase speeds of the people that are using it. At intersections, we do something similar to narrowing called bulb outs. These basically are where we stripe a smaller intersection than is out there today. And that works pretty much the same way. It visually shrinks the area that cars are supposed to maneuver in. And that smaller area forces slower speeds. So we all know if we're, entering the interstate or driving really fast, those curves are really wide and sweeping. But when we're pulling into our driveway, making a really sharp turn, we have to be going at a much slower speed to pull off that turn. So that's basically how these work. They have an added benefit of shortening the crossing distance for pedestrians. So the amount of space that people walking might conflict with people driving is reduced. And in neighborhoods that see a lot of street parking, they can also help enforce the existing parking regulations that say we're not supposed to park within 30 feet of a crosswalk because that covers up the visibility of somebody who may be using the crosswalk. I don't think that this neighborhood in particular sees a lot of problems with parking too close to that intersection of Springs Branch and Shepherd Hills, but it is a pretty wide intersection, sort of like that photo to the top left. So if you all are interested in something like bulb outs, it is something we can consider as part of this design.
This may be a good time to make my comment. I live on that corner and I've lived here for 30 years. I have an autistic son. I used to be able to walk on the streets with him, even though he had a tendency to want to get away from me. I couldn't do that anymore. The speed on the roads has increased. And I think importantly, the tendency to use the streets has increased recently because of the heavy traffic on Myatt Drive and Gallatin Pike. We are a shortcut, no doubt about it. And I think one of the problems with the speed is people think getting frustrated sitting in line on Myatt Drive. When they take our street, they tend to go faster because they've run slowed down already. So I think one of the big problems, I think what has helped a great deal is the stop sign on Paula Drive. There's another problem in that people don't stop. I mean, I live on the corner. I see it all the time. I would say about 1/3 of the people do not stop at the stop signs. So, that's regarding my intersection.
I live directly across the intersection from him, and I concur with everything that he's saying. And I know you guys do, studies and whatnot, not trying to undermining, but it is definitely a cut through because people bypass, I believe it's 3 traffic lights. The one on Spring Branch and Myatt, they bypass Gallatin and Rivergate, Coot Lane and Gallatin, and Shepherd Hills and Gallatin, and they'll use it to come up Spring Branch onto Shepherd Hills, cut down Paula onto Twin Hills, back onto Gallatin Road. And it's just like they're racing for time, so to speak.
Yeah, these aren't your neighbors that are driving through.
Correct.
It's people that are on their commute and in a hurry. Got it. Well, I'm sorry to hear that. It certainly does not sound like geographically this pair of streets has really been set up for success in that regard. And yeah, certainly excessive cutting through is not what we want for your street. We do have limited options, like we're not able to cut off the route completely.
100%, yeah.
But we are, intending to design a project that will add some friction to that move. So there hopefully would be some people that might be dissuaded from cutting through if it meant they were going to have to do so at a safe speed. But we can talk details with our concept in a second. But thank you for letting me know that. It's definitely something we want to keep in mind as we do our design. So moving on to chicanes, this is something that we do for wider roads where we don't have a really high demand for street parking. What we do is basically take the center line of the road and zigzag it back and forth. It makes it less of a straight shot that you can just kind of blow through. You sort of have to do a little more maneuvering, and that will slow speeds that way. It can affect the amount of on-street parking just because you sort of lose one row per per bend, but there are a lot of streets where that's not really a problem, and they would rather have those chicanes there than not. And then lastly, we have traffic circles. These work well in like really large intersections. They're sort of like bulb outs where they eat up the pavement, but from the inside out instead of the outside in. It is kind of hard to fit these in on most streets in Nashville because what we don't have, unlike the picture here, is 2 intersecting like really wide roads with parking on both sides. On narrower roads, it's pretty challenging to get these to work and still be able to make all the turning movements that we need to make. So this is one half of the concept, Shepherd Hills and Spring Branch. I'll hang out here, but I just wanted to kind of do a check. Were there any questions from the toolkit section of the slides?
No, but I did have a question. Have the WeGo buses quit cutting through, Randy?
Go ahead.
Hey, Randy, have the WeGo buses quit using that as a cut through?
I don't see them as often as I used to.
Okay, because I sent that forward. Okay.
Oh, that's interesting. So
I don't generally see them myself either.
Yeah,
Okay,
the only
good.
time I've ever seen them is when there's been a wreck down on Gallatin Road and they had to get around it.
Okay, good.
In a response to your question about your toolkit, I would say one thing that has not been discussed is sidewalks. I'm afraid, not for me, because I don't walk on the roads anymore, but there are people who do. I'm afraid for them because of how narrow Shepherd Hills is.
Totally agree.
Yeah. And if it helps, I mean, there's not really anyone that parks on the street, but because the neighborhood it's all acre lots, so our driveways are decently long for to fit multiple cars in. But just a small thing. I didn't know if that mattered at all.
Yeah, no, that is good to know. I will address the sidewalks question and would love to put sidewalks here if we could with this project. It is something that is quite a bit more involved than the kinds of tools that we're discussing here. And often there are pretty serious like stormwater and like right-of-way acquisition concerns that make sidewalks a little less accessible of a project. I will encourage you to make a request to Hub Nashville for sidewalks, just so you're on their radar. But it is worth noting that there is a huge backlog in Nashville for sidewalks, just because most of our neighborhoods were built without them, and there are some very high injury roads where Nashville's focused on cleaning up those gaps before they get further into residential areas. But the bright side is we will do everything we can with this project to make sure that the people driving on the road are doing so safely. And we've heard from residents that have these installed that it does become a nicer environment to walk in. So certainly we can imagine the difference between being driven by at 25 miles an hour, where someone might have a little more time to see you if they're driving, versus the 37-mile-an-hour speeds that we're seeing today, where people A, are going way faster, and it would be a worse accident, and B, they just have a little more time to absorb their surroundings and be aware of people that are walking. With that, I'll move on to kind of just explaining what we're looking at here on the concept. So like I said, this is Shepherd Hills Drive, but the project also includes Spring Branch Road. Hearing the feedback y'all have given, I'm assuming that decision was made because both of those function in conjunction as a cut through. So it sort of makes sense to me that these were combined into one. And I will say this looks like it's a little more zoomed in than Shepherd Hills. So you can see that we're proposing 7 locations for speed cushions. They're all around 350 feet apart. That's on the closer end of our range. Our range is like 300 to 500 is sort of the sweet spot that we aim for. We'll try to go a little closer together on streets where we really want to make sure speeding is not attractive. And then here we've got 3, and I know that we're only able to place these 3 because of a large hill right near Cude, or is it Cude or Cude?
Cood.
All right, Cude Lane. So there is a region on Spring Branch where it's too steep for cushions. That'd be like above 6 or 7% grade. But where we have that, we have recommended a couple of radar feedback signs just to serve as kind of that reminder that, maybe we don't have speed cushions here, but please still, go an appropriate speed. And that also will sort of help anyone who's been caught, picking up speed on the downhill to not, remind them that the speed limit is this, and you're going this fast. So what we don't have on this concept is bulb outs, but as I've noted before, Shepherd Hills Drive and Spring Branch Road have a pretty large intersection. I wanted to kind of hear from you all. Is that something that you all are excited about, or not so much, and you'd rather we stick with the cushions? We have some flexibility on these roads, so we want to hear.
Are you asking about the roundabout?
No, so this does not fit. I did check, but these would.
Oh, that, okay, yeah.
Mhm.
I don't know that would help, actually, but that's just my opinion.
Would this be like in conjunction with the speed cushions?
Yeah, it is not. It is not either or. We would
Okay.
add it or not add it.
And I do think, as of course, the person that is sitting in the driver's seat has control over their vehicle, and they make the choice at the end of the day. And I understand this is to kind of help thwart or persuade people to, drive more calmly. I think it, yes, could possibly help. I think the speed cushions would more, but I do think that would have some type of benefit. And will it also include the I don't know what those are called, the little white stick plastic
Yeah,
things
we've
that are
done
there?
them
Okay.
with and without the delineators. That's what
Delineators.
it's called, the white sticks. The ones with the delineators are a little more visible, and then therefore they're just like a little more effective at constraining the space. But we realize that they're not everyone's favorite thing to have around, so they certainly aren't required to be there.
Correct. I know it can kind of make a neighborhood look a little bit more commercial. But yeah, I mean, I think it would, because I know, visuals do also aid in, people's adherence to speed and things like that. When things are, wide open, they tend to drive a little bit faster. I think it would help.
Okay.
In that regard, I think it's important to keep in mind the normal painting, the striping on the roads, which on our streets have often faded away and are not much of a deterrent to a driver. From the driver's point of view, I think more than those narrowing paint lines is the crosswalk lines. From a driver's point of view, I tend to be more cautious when I see that. But there's no sidewalk.
Absolutely. I was going to say that earlier, but I didn't want to jump the gun. I definitely agree with that.
I do too.
Yeah, that's great to hear as well. I will have to get back to you all on crosswalks. Right now, I believe there is a more specific set of like crosswalk policies being developed. So I'll certainly ask for it, see what we're able to do, and if that matches up. The fact that there's
Yeah,
not
I
a
can see that
sidewalk
with
there
no
now,
sidewalks.
yeah, like that
Yeah.
could be not to the benefit of the decision to add side or crosswalks. So if we aren't able to, though, I do want to let you know that is an option available to be requested through Hub Nashville, and it certainly wouldn't hurt to just do it if you're looking for it. And if we can do it with this project, great. And if we can't, we'll have the request on file to evaluate it as a standalone treatment. Cool. Well, I've heard some some positive feedback on bulb outs, maybe a little bit of not skepticism that they would do a whole lot. I think we'll go ahead and draw them in just because it is an intersection that I've noticed is wider than it really needs to be. And I've heard that the stop sign at the moment as it currently exists isn't quite getting the job done when it comes to people using the intersection properly.
Oh no.
Yeah, certainly 1/3 of folks running is not what we want at all. So that's just about all I have on the design. Are there any other questions or things that you all think we should look at in addition to what you're seeing here?
Well, I know that Hub Nashville is a really responsive website. A few months ago, I put in a request to have several potholes filled, and within 2 hours, they were there and done with the job, and I was very impressed by that.
Yeah, we're pretty pleased with with
I'm a hubber myself.
excellent. I can't say that the timeline will be quite as short with things like sidewalks, but it is a website that is paid attention to, and we take all those requests seriously.
Yeah, they definitely listen to you on that. I've put in several requests on that before.
Great. Cool. Well, if we're ready to move on, we can talk about some of the next steps in the program. So what we're looking at here is a flow chart of just a given traffic calming project. As you all know, it starts with an application where we, take everyone's information and then do that prioritization and selection process where we collect data and then rank all the streets based on their need for traffic calming. And then right here at the kind of red circle at the neighborhood meeting, you all got mailers inviting you to join this WebEx, and we talked about the program, toolbox, design, and all that. The next thing we're going to do is finalize the design based on the feedback we've received from you all and a field visit we're going to do to kind of check that all the assumptions we're making are correct. We want to make sure we know where that hill is, starts and ends, and just kind of fill in the details of what all this is going to look like. After that, we can do one of two things. If we're ready to just sort of go for it, move quickly, we can post the plans online and send out the postcards to vote. We'll mail those out the same way we did with these invitations, where everyone will get instructions on how to go online, view the plans, and submit yes or no. We can also schedule a second neighborhood meeting to review the design that we've made, answer any further questions. If any of your neighbors weren't able to make it tonight, it's an opportunity for them to hear a similar spiel that we've done this evening. And we're really happy to do either approach. It does take about an extra month, maybe 2 or so, to fit the second meeting in between getting the mailers done and scheduling and everything. But then after that, we'll do the plans online and vote, and then ultimately submit it for construction should it pass that ballot. So we do want to get some feedback on like which of those approaches is preferred. So if anyone feels strongly or mildly one way or another, feel free to either speak up, or the chat is also available for feedback. We'll do either one, whatever y'all want.
As opposed to like or I may have missed a question about
Sure.
what the construction.
Oh, you mean like
Or what? I guess, sorry, just repeat the question. I may have just misunderstood.
Okay. So after tonight, we're gonna do our design. We can either schedule a second meeting, or we can post our plans and move on to the ballot. So we just want to know do you all want a second meeting to review the program and the design, or would you rather just take a look at the plans and vote yes or no?
Well, when we did Paula Drive, you know, we sent the cards out, and then I think more people got involved, and then we changed it a little bit. And that not still be the case on Shepherd Hills and Spring Branch?
So the feedback I've gotten, it sounds like y'all are generally okay with the speed cushions and the feedback signs, and we're going to look into adding some bulb outs here. I think the only unknown is whether or not we can or can't add the crosswalk striping. I'm going to check in with NDOT on that and just see if they've kind of finalized that flow chart. But I don't hear anything that
I have a question that hasn't been brought up yet, and that is the speed. On Coode Lane, I think they just changed the speed to 25. And I know that in Twin Hills, which is a block over, it's 25, but we're still at 30. So is the proposal to also change ours to 25?
It's not. So this
There's a sign there
program-
that's 25, I believe.
No, it's 30. If you, down by the Taylor place, by Gallatin Pike, there's a sign that says 30. Now, it says 30.
Yeah. Well, if it's posted at 30, then that is what the speed limit is. So the way speed limits work in Nashville is we can consider lowering them, but it has to have an engineering study done and go to the Traffic and Parking Commission to be approved. For those two reasons, it's not something that we do as traffic calming projects because they're not like physical devices that we can install just on our own. But I would definitely encourage you, if you'd prefer the speed be 25, to make that request, because we will then do that study and look into lowering it. And it very well may be the case that that limit is changed.
Randy, are you saying part of Shepherd Hills, Shepherd Hills and Spring Branch is 25 and the other half is 30, or?
No, on Twin Hills, it's 25. On Coode Lane, it's 25. On Shepherd Hills, it's 30.
All the way, okay.
Yeah, that's good to know. I would recommend making that request via Hub. It sounds like y'all would prefer the speed limit to be 25. And certainly we'll design this project to target lower speeds. And that may help as well.
I'll speak as an antagonist to what I just said. Given the fact that it is a shortcut, I mean, shortcuts are important. If you restrict people from using this shortcut, you're going to get more frustrated drivers on Myatt Drive and Gallatin Pike. So that has to be considered too.
Yeah. Like I mentioned before, we're not preventing anyone from using either of these streets. The devices that we're proposing are only intended to persuade folks to drive safely. So we wouldn't want to do anything or just sort of like leave it in its current state to allow it to be used in a way that's not safe. So you can imagine that if folks are using it as an arterial road, that's just not what this road was designed or intended for. But certainly if there were like a wreck on Myatt or Gallatin, people would still have access to the road.
And what are the rules for street widths? I would imagine that Spring Branch is narrow because it's older. Is there a reason why it couldn't be widened?
Spring Branch, I believe, is the wider of the two. I think that's.
I'm sorry, I meant Shepherd Hills.
Yeah, Shepherd Hills. That's the one that's 22 feet. So
Yeah.
two 11-foot lanes is plenty of space for 2 lanes of traffic. We certainly don't see enough volume to justify adding a 3rd lane. And that would probably be more expensive than adding sidewalks, because it would impede the stormwater flow on both sides, and not, it wouldn't quite be consistent with the goals of this program.
Thank you.
Sure. Did we have any time to think about whether or not we want a second meeting to be scheduled?
I'll just give my 2 cents here. I think there are people who should be concerned, but are not participating in this meeting. It might be beneficial to offer them another opportunity. If they get another mailer or email regarding the balloting, it may take some by surprise, even though they've already had a chance. So, but the problem is you might not get any better participation than you did right now. So I don't know.
Yeah, that's okay. And I think I tend to agree with you. The 3 residents we have is a lower attendance than we typically see. So we are more than happy to schedule a second one. And I don't think it will be an immense delay to the construction of the project.
Well, I've got neighbors who are not attending who I know want the speed bumps, the cushions. There's 3 or 4 that I've talked to that want them. For some reason, they haven't attended tonight, but I have talked
That's
to.
That's what I was going to say. I've had a lot more people reach out to me about this road and everything than just the 3 that are on here. So I'm a little, yeah. I thought this would be a very crowded call, to be honest with you.
I did as well. I let a few of my neighbors
I'm
know.
just totally amazed that only 3 is on here, because I have had a lot of people reach out to me on Shepherd Hills stuff for the traffic calming. So I'm a little surprised.
Well, it's certainly good to hear that there's enthusiasm out there. Does anyone feel like we shouldn't have a second meeting? We're happy to go either way, but usually if anyone is wanting to have one, we'll defer to that.
I think a second meeting will be fine. I mean, if it's just according to the chart, just a 1 month delay, I think in the grand scheme that won't affect the outcome as drastically.
Great. Well, that sounds good. We will go ahead and do our design and then get that second meeting scheduled. As I'm sure you all have been, feel free to talk with your neighbors about this, sort of let them know. And then after that happens, we'll go ahead and do that voting. Because we're doing a second meeting, we don't need to spend quite as much time on the details of this, but I'm happy to answer any questions about how it's going to work. But as you all may know, this is a program that you apply for, and the residents will approve it once they've seen the design. So 66% of respondents voting yes means the project moves forward. And if we don't meet that threshold, the project will not move forward. We do send ballot postcards to each of the owners of the properties that abut the right-of-ways. So these yellow highlighted parcels are the ones that will get those, with the exception of businesses, vacant properties, duplicate owners, things like that. But that's about all I've got. Does anyone have any questions before we wrap up?
Just want to say good meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Thank you. Thank y'all for chiming in.
Absolutely. When exactly will those ballots be mailed out so I can have everyone on the lookout?
We will do that following the second meeting. If we do that meeting and there is indication that we need to like rethink anything with our design, it would maybe be a little longer after that. But if we go to that meeting and everyone's like, yeah, do it, hurry up, we could send the ballots as soon as, that week.
I was also gonna was that, Mr. Bell talking?
Yes, ma'am.
I was gonna let you know, when we did Paula Drive, once the postcards went out and stuff before the end date, me and Mr. Portal, I came over there and we walked the street and knocked on the door to make sure they actually can send me a list of who has voted and who hasn't voted. And then we can hit the doors and try to make sure that we get what we need to get, and we're good with it. That's what me and Mr. Portal did to make sure they got the percent they needed.
Yes, ma'am. That sounds good to me.
Okay, so we'll stay in touch, and you can be you can be that guy. I don't think we've ever met, but yeah.
I don't think we
Great.
have.
Well, we can go ahead and wrap up. Got some social media accounts that NDOT has if you prefer to stay in touch that way. They've also got TrafficCalming.Nashville.gov with a lot of good information about the program beyond what we've talked about tonight. And then these are some email addresses you're welcome to reach out to if anything should come up, questions or additional feedback. I will ask if you email me, also copy NDOT TrafficCalming.Nashville.gov. That just keeps them in the loop as well. But in general, everyone, thanks for attending this evening. It was nice talking to you, and we'll get working on our design.
Y'all have a good night.
You too. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Thank you.